Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Line Plans. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we're going to be breaking down the bare bone basics that you need to kind of get started with planning. But the way that we're going to do that today is I'm going to actually give you 3 separate categories. So rather than overwhelm you with these are all the things that you need, I'm going to give you 3 separate tiers because I understand that some of you get into planning for just simply productivity. Some of you get into planning for more of the aesthetics and the way that it makes you feel. And some of you, like myself, get into it because it's not only an amazing hobby, it helps your mental health, but it's also, we want kind of a combination of all of the things. So I wanted to kind of cater to all 3 of these categories. So there's going to be a timestamp in the description, so check that out. And without further ado, why don't we just dive right in on what are some of the basics that you need for you to get started with planning. So as you can tell, I have quite a few things in front of me, and I was very inspired to make this video because I wanted to kind of address sort of like the elephant in the room. And unfortunately, whenever I was looking at videos on YouTube, every single one of the videos would sort of tell me all of the million and one things that I needed in order for me to at least like just kind of get in and get my feet wet a little bit within planning, within the planning community. And unfortunately, if you're like me and you wanted to kind of get into it because of your mental health and also to kind of keep you productive, it feels very, very overwhelming. And not only that, but it also feels very expensive to kind of create your own system, and then you're watching all of these different videos trying to figure out which system is like the best one for you. So let me just set everything aside, and I'm just gonna open up my notes because I made a million and one notes. Okay, so the very first category that I'm going to kind of speak to is, I'm calling it like an entry-level category. It's something where you're not quite sure sort of what system will work for you. So I wanted to kind of give you 3 different options. These are essentially the exact same thing. And then I wanted to offer you another option as well. I'm just gonna give you one, just to kind of keep things simple. I'm going to use the planner that I actually currently use as my main system. You can literally use this one. You can literally use any one of the book-bound planners, but I actually recommend either going with one of 2 directions. So when you're just getting started with planning and you're really, really unsure of what layout will work for you, whether you need a monthly layout or whether you need a weekly layout, or do you need both, or do you need a daily as well, it can get really overwhelming. And what I really love about printed planners that are like pre-made for you. So this one is a pre-made planner that has both the weeks. You have a weekly layout that's all printed in, as well as you have a monthly layout that is kind of pre-printed for you. It's already pre-created for you. I really love this because you're not actually spending most of your time with creating a layout that you're going to be needing for you to kind of plan whatever you want to plan. So whether you're going to be like writing in your work schedule, your school schedule, any dates that are like relatively important, any reminders, all of the things can kind of come into the monthly, and then you can kind of trickle that information down into your weekly layout, and then it gives you a full page of writing whatever you want. I love this. This is the Hobonichi Weeks. It's popular because you have a weekly layout and you can kind of just plan, write whatever you need to, or leave it blank if you really want to do that. But it's such a small little compact system. And if you still need more space to write, at the very back, you also just get a whole bunch of blank pages. So I love this because it's small and compact, but for some of you, that might not actually work well, because if your handwriting isn't actually tiny, then you might need something a little bit bigger. So this is a B6 size. This is the Sterling Ink Common Planner. It's brand new, that just came out this year. And I'll just show you the layout. So this would be a weekly layout. So in this one, you get a weekly layout, a monthly layout, and a whole bunch of blank pages in the back. So it's relatively simple, where areas that you need printed or that you need kind of pre-filled for you, where you're not constantly creating your new weekly layout, it's already kind of made for you, and then you can like fill it in or leave it blank, whatever works. And then in the back, you have a bunch of blank pages, and again, you can kind of use them. If you want to use this as scrap paper, you can. It gives you the freedom to use it for whatever your needs are. And when you're just getting started and you're not really sure whether you would even need a daily page or you would need necessarily a page where you would want to journal or memory keep or keep extra notes or reminders, having blank pages can be almost like it can provide you with a sense of freedom, which is something that I really love. So to me, the category that we're looking at right now is bare bone basics. You basically just need a planner of some sort. You want to spend very minimal time with actually filling it out. When you're not just fiddling with it, you're going to spend very little time and money on any type of aesthetic like stickers. There's really, here we're just kind of testing the waters. We're not really sure whether we want to like fully deck it out. We want sticker kits. We're not really, all of that just sounds really overwhelming, and the choices are like, it feels like it's endless. So what I recommend is to get one book, one system, preferably with a monthly and a weekly layout, if that feels like something that's calling you, and maybe a notebook if you really need it. Some of the notebooks that I personally love, this one is a field notes notebook. It's small, it's compact, it's literally just a blank notebook. But you can use it multiple different ways, or you might find that this might be also too much. And you need a pen. So the pen that I love, and I mean, I have like a full video on different pens that work really well, but some of my favorites are, this is the Sarasa clip-in 0.5 thickness. It's just a thin like ballpoint pen. This one is the Muji pen. It's loved by many. It's a very popular pen. It's very inexpensive. Usually you can get this on Amazon and you can get like a full like package of them, and they last a really long time. I really love this also because it comes, when you buy it, you can get it with like multiple different colors. It writes thin enough where if you wanted to color coordinate your spreads, you could do that. You don't necessarily have to. You might not even think about color coding. You might just be like, let me just have some space where I can just write down my schedule and quick reminders so that my thoughts are actually on paper. So that's why I kind of recommend something very simple. Find a pen that you really like, and then maybe a highlighter. Highlighters, you can go with something like a Tombow pen, which is a water-based, again, like a fine tip brush pen. But I mean, any highlighter will do. If you have like a Staedtler, like a chunky Staedtler, use that. Like literally, it's at this point of the game, use whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. One of the most popular ones are the mild liners. On both ends, you have a highlighter. It looks really bold, but it's actually not very bold. It's perfect. It's perfect for highlighting within grids where you just kind of want to just create a highlight. And then the back end of it, the fine tip, allows you to also create some dots, create some highlights. So, I mean, these are the most popular ones, but honestly, whatever highlighter you have will allow you to create some segments within your spread where it kind of pops from the page so that your eyes are kind of drawn to that. That's sort of like the idea behind it. So that's sort of like something that I would kind of recommend when you're just getting started. If this feels overwhelming, option number 2 is just get a blank notebook. Just something very simple where you can just kind of write notebooks, all you have to do is just kind of Google or go on Amazon and kind of take a look at the different notebooks. There's some that have more sturdier outer cover, which will help if you're carrying your notebook with you everywhere. Then it allows you to kind of stand up to the test of time, so to say. But if it's always going to be at home, and depending on how often you end up using your book, sometimes you might end up using it once a week, or maybe you check in with it once a day. At this point, we're unsure where you're at. So I wanted to give you the bare bone basics. It might just be a highlighter, a pen, and a book. And essentially you could just be done here. Now, what happens when we're looking at more of a mid-range usage, where you're maybe using it like once a day, you're using it a bit more regularly, you're kind of getting a hang of, okay, I'm kind of figuring out like what system works, what layout works for me regularly. I'm not really using social media as a way to tell me what I should be using, but really honing in on what your actual needs are. This stage to me is so essential because it can really if you're using social media as a form of inspiration and as a form of direction versus inspiration, it can really take you down these deep rabbit holes that will cost you a ton of money, and then you end up with a whole bunch of supplies that you end up not really using. So at this point, you're getting a bit more specific with what your needs are. You might start introducing some decor, not really a ton. So you might be looking at something like, this one is from Faded Chronicle, some kits where it has like certain icons included, certain like minimalist decor where maybe you just place something in the corner. So this would be something like a dot sticker would be something that you might introduce, maybe a washi tape, maybe like something very small, like maybe some dot, maybe a washi, maybe some highlighter, but really that's not really the point. The point isn't to deck out your spreads. The point is just to kind of add a little accent, make your daily spreads or make your weekly spreads kind of stand out and make it a little bit different than how it looked last week. At this point, you might be using it a little bit more for function and for productivity rather than to make like an aesthetic statement. And yeah, so like the idea is mainly like to use the decor as a form of just something that kind of like pops off the page. Cloth and Paper is a great company for that because their decor pieces are very minimalistic. So this would be like their drops. They also have some like spotlight, like these little flags that are excellent, or these dot stickers. Now dot stickers, you can do 1,001 thing with them. I believe that on this one, I've used it. So as you can tell, I use dots pretty heavily, but I wanted to show you the 1 week where I was using more dots than anything else and more minimalistic decor. We'll find it, I swear. Again, at this point, highlighters will also be your best friend. They will help you kind of like hone in on allowing certain things to pop. As you can, okay, so this would be like the little corner stickers, little icon stickers. If you wanted to use them, will also be very helpful. Just small minimalistic stickers. Maybe you do an Etsy purchase or two, and then you're pretty much good to go. Like you don't really need too many things. As you can tell in this spread in particular, I don't really have a ton of like washi tapes and more washi tapes and kits and, you know, like I don't have things like this where I have like a sticker that says to do and a sticker that says today. Like I don't have any of these included because I wanted to keep it very clean. I would have a couple of like dot flags and some corner round stickers and kind of call it a day. So it's very, very clean, very minimalistic. And this is something where you maybe have 15 to 20 minutes, you kind of throw it together and you enter in all of the necessary information. At this point in the game, I would recommend 1 to 2. Maybe you're at the point where you have 1 or 2 planners. So you might have this one and you may have like one that actually comes with you that has all of your work stuff in there. Maybe one of them is a ring bound planner. Ring bound planners, we haven't really talked too much about them, but basically I love them because again, it's a ring bound system and it's more about the function than it is about anything else. So you can get both, like most of the inserts that you can get, you can print them yourself. So you can make them really inexpensive and it allows you to kind of pre-plan ahead of time. But what I love about this is that they're very, very interchangeable. So if you're finding that with the Bookbound, with one of these guys where it's a book bound system, if you don't want to constantly carry the full year with you, you only want maybe 3 to 4 months at the time, it's a fantastic system to kind of just keep it very minimalistic and just kind of keep what you actually need. That's like one of the main takeaways, one of the main reasons why I really loved this system when I got started with it, is that I didn't feel that pressure that I needed to keep everything in here and then the whole year needed to be here. And then I would like spend like half an hour just thumbing through everything. Now at this point, as far as supplies are concerned, maybe you have like an actual holder that holds your system together, something that has some rings, or maybe you have your book bound planner, maybe you have a cover for it to keep it protected. You use it regularly. Maybe you try different pens. So you might stick with the same pens that I recommended. Maybe you still continue to use your highlighters, Or maybe you end up kind of diving into at least the basics of fountain pens and fountain pen inks, which allows you the flexibility of, especially if you're left-handed, you might be holding, like if you're finding that you're struggling with some of the pens that I'm recommending, trying out fountain pens might be up your alley. Especially if you're starting to kind of create or develop a preference to paper quality and the way that the paper thickness and the way the paper feels. So when it comes to like the Sterling Ink Common Planner, it has Tomoe River paper in it. Same thing with Hobonichi planners. They are very famous for really holding a ton of information, but as you can tell, it's a very, very thin system. And it's mainly because of the quality of the paper. It's mainly because the paper is so thin that it's not nearly as bulky as the ring-bound systems or the paper that is being used within that. They each have their pros and cons, but at this point, you might be developing a preference to one over the other. You might be developing a preference, or you might end up using one system far more, or you prefer to use one far more than you end up using the other. So one system might get neglected a bit more, and it's kind of part of that process of just figuring out what actually works a little bit better for you. The other thing that you might want to do is to kind of look at like what type of highlighter works best for you. Some people really love the mild liners. I end up kind of steering away from these just a little bit, and I do have a preference to the Tombows, but the Tombows are sort of one of those things where once you start using them, they tend to kind of dry out. On me anyway, they tend to dry out because I end up forgetting to use them or forget to use them regularly. As you can tell, like especially like on monthlies, I don't end up using my highlighters. It's not one of the #1 things that I end up using. Usually like I end up adding a few dots, a few stickers, and that's about it. I don't really fuss too much about the decor of how my monthly looks. And even in this ring-bound system, when I'm looking at my weekly layout, okay, this one is a daily, but if I'm looking at like a weekly layout, it's one of those things where it has more information, it has more writing than decor. This one is very much more about the function than it is about how many stickers can I put down. Speaking of stickers, at this point, you might be kind of looking at like, okay, so what would be like the essentials that I would actually recommend at this stage? Honestly, having something, if you're going with a ring-bound system, having something from cloth and paper tends to work really, really well because this is such a minimalistic system. Their quality is fantastic. It does become a bit pricier, but the good news is that you wouldn't need to use as much because again, like the whole idea of minimalism is just, it's take as little as you need. So having something like a dot sticker, you would end up basically just, if there's an important day or something, you might just end up highlighting the day itself and see how that immediately kind of pops a little bit more. So at this point, you might dive into this. You might dive into something like Midori stickers, where again, like it lasts you quite a while. Some of the emoji stickers that both Ohana Story and Coffee Monster Skull have are fantastic. If you're sticking with something like the book-bound system that I mentioned from Sterling Ink does have, and most of you are familiar, they do have both sticker sheets and they have subscription kits. I didn't mention at this stage for you to get into subscriptions. You can. Again, it can be a slippery slope because you end up spending money every single month for supplies that you may or may not even know how to use, or you end up not utilizing them to the capacity that you could be, which means that you might not enjoy them as much, which means that you might get frustrated, and then you end up basically just chucking the system like it's not working for you. So at this stage, honestly, like my biggest advice is less is more. Going slow, as much as it feels like all of these systems and all of these supplies are like the absolute best thing and you need everything. And I think that most planners that have been around for a while kind of like run down that, that made that mistake as well, where it's like you see a new shiny pen or you see a new shiny, you know, sticker sheet, and then of course like we need it because It's like we love having all of these beautiful things. It makes us feel so good and so connected. And of course, it also gives us the idea that, you know, when you're associated with like the aesthetics of how your planner looks, then mentally it also kind of creates a bit more clarity, and it creates like this expansive, beautiful feeling that you are essentially creating something beautiful, right? And I mean, who doesn't love using beautiful things? We all do to a certain extent. So let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about what happens when you are now have a system in place. You've been using it for a couple of years. You kind of know sort of, okay, what's happening with you. Or maybe you're just like a deep enthusiast that really have all of these systems figured out, and you understand how your mind works, but then you also understand how much time you actually have available. Because keep in mind, like the more you have to pay attention to it, right? So the more you have, the more time commitment, the more you have to kind of manage it, and then the more money it costs also to kind of maintain all of these things. So I call this like the third level in the beginner stages is like the committed planner enthusiast. Now, committed planner enthusiasts will have multiple systems for multiple purposes. So that would be something like having a planner for work, having a planner for memory keeping. So for me, I would have this guy with its own nice little cover, and like this is simply for memory keeping. So when I update it. When I don't, I kind of go back and update it later. But really the idea here is for me to just use this purely for memory keeping when I'm writing down like really what's happening with our family. So this is fantastic if you're going to be using it regularly, if you want to update it all the time, if you want to use different forms of stickers and journaling supplies. This is the stage where I would like to say, okay, you have all of these beautiful things, give them an outlet. And so use the systems that you have and kind of write regularly, update regularly. I chose to use the Hobonichi Cousin, like this larger size planner. As you can tell, it's a larger size in comparison to the planner that I have right next to it, because I really wanted an outlet where we can do memory keeping. So that's essentially what I end up using it for. Even here, even though some of these spreads look busy, you can tell that I keep the colors relatively consistent, and I still don't use a ton of just different journaling supplies. I still try to keep it more minimal than anything else. But it's definitely giving me that outlet for me. If I wanted to sketch, I can sketch. If I wanted to draw, or if I wanted to paint, it kind of gives me that outlet. Is this necessary? For the sake of planning, no, it is not necessary. But for the sake of mental health, absolutely, it is necessary. So it's being clear about what is it for. If it's for managing your mental health, then you need to have an outlet for it. If it's for keeping you accountable within your wellness journey, then yes, it's absolutely necessary. If it's for having a space where you can have a brain dump. So in this planner, actually, I do have just blank pages where really like I can write whatever I really need to. If I wanted to do a brain dump here, I can 100% do that. So when we're looking at a planner enthusiast, to me, it's not someone who spends a lot of money on planner supplies, but someone who has multiple different needs and multiple different functions. And therefore, the planner system kind of suits that as an outlet. So therefore, you might not have one systems in place, you might have multiple. You might have a couple of planners, a couple of journals. You might have one for work, for memory keeping, for social media, for health and wellness, for mental health, for travel, for memory keeping, all the things. So like the function of a planner can go so far and beyond just keeping track of your daily schedule. The other thing is that it's being used multiple times a day. So I wouldn't recommend right off the gate to have multiple systems in place because you're unsure of what you're going to need. I would recommend having multiple systems in place because you have the time, the mental bandwidth, and the commitment for you to update them. Because there's nothing worse than, as we're approaching the middle of the year right now, when you're looking at your full setup for the year and then you find out, oh my gosh, I invested all this money and time and energy in research and setting it all up so that it's just perfect, so that I find out that it's actually not working for me, and then now I have to invest in another system altogether. So to save yourself from that, that's why I always kind of recommend just to start with like one and see how you do. And sometimes the way that you see how you do will take a few months for you to get started with the habit, to build it into a system, and to see if you can be consistent with it, and see if you actually enjoy that process, or if it feels more like you're doing homework and it's a chore. At this point, if you have multiple systems, then you know that you have a preference for each system, because that's how your brain works. So for me personally, I find that these different systems, I interact with each of them completely differently. So the way that I would write in my minimalist planner, and I mean, if you look at my previous spreads, it'll kind of make sense. The way that I write in my daily, and how much decor and everything else I use, and the way that I fill out my weekly, very, like literally, there's basically just me writing in there. There's barely any stickers, barely any dot stickers. It's not really about that. It's more about just highlighting what is actually important. Sometimes I don't even fill it out because most of it is on my computer anyhow. Again, I just kind of write in. It's rare that I actually add this many stickers personally, but it's more about the functionality. To me, this planner is very much about functionality. And of course I wanted it to look really pretty, right? So then I would have like these dashboards, and I would have like, you know, like these color stickies and whatnot. And sometimes they fill up a purpose, and sometimes they really don't. Sometimes they're literally just there so that I remember to use them. And that's totally fine. So again, it's being clear about what is the function of it, and will it serve that purpose. And then as far as planner supplies are concerned, on this one, I keep it actually fairly minimal, because I have so much that I have left over from my previous cloth and paper subscription. If you find that you're just starting out, subscription services, and I will list a few on the page, are sort of a fantastic way of getting started, because you're paying a monthly fee, and it allows you to build up your stash without you having to actually choose what is the theme of the month. It's sort of pre-selected for you. So there's a lot of benefits to having subscription services. I have accumulated like many of these supplies that cost me a fraction of a cost. Even with me living in Canada and cloth and paper being in the States, it still cost me a lot less than if I were to go to their online shop and buy them like one by one. So there's the benefit of that. And then there's also the downside of that. Like, it kind of comes with that caveat that if you continue your subscription and you find that you're actually not reaching for this, it will take you a while to use most of these supplies up, especially if you keep those subscriptions going. So just kind of be wary of that. And then also having things like, maybe you've dived more into fountain pens, or you have a preference to fountain pens with some of your systems, like I do. Like, I actually have a preference for fountain pens within my Hobonichi planner as well as my common planner. But then I also love using my Muji pens, or I believe this one is the Uni One pen. This one is a 3-in-1 Uni One pen. This is like one of my favorite pens of all time. To use in literally any one of my planners. It's just one of those like really simple, here's a black one, here's a blue and a red. And it's like a no, like it will never fail me. But I mean, again, it's having to try all of these different systems out and figuring out which one works, right? Highlighters, I mean, sometimes I use highlighters. Sometimes I actually have a preference for these dot markers versus highlighters, because as you can tell, like the tip is more rounded. It leaves a very minimalistic, it just like kind of leaves a dot. If I want to highlight with it, I can, but it also serves as a double for a dot sticker. So if I don't feel like grabbing the stickers, I can just kind of use the highlighter and call it a day. So I can keep it very simple, or I can kind of go more into detail and spend a bit more time. So I don't do that so much within my my VDS planner, but I most definitely, and I think if you've been around for a while, you already know I generally spend a bit of time just setting up my weekly spreads within my common planner. So this one actually was not this week, it was actually last week's spread. And not a ton of writing, but there's a ton of decor, and there's like multiple different journaling stickers and just, you know, press-on stickers and things like that. So I love most of my journaling stickers more than I love my planner stickers. But that preference, so that would be something like this. This would be like a press-on sticker where you just kind of pull off the backing. There's just sort of like a parchment or wax. It feels like it's parchment. And anyways, you just kind of pull it off, and then you kind of press on wherever you want to like leave that design left on your page. And it's fantastic if you don't want to bulk up your planner with a ton of actual stickers. So because it doesn't really, these don't really bulk up your planner. Or you can use something like these minimalist little tiny little micro stickers that are also fantastic, where you can just kind of add little highlights everywhere. I mean, honestly, the options are absolutely limitless. All it takes is for you to kind of just check out a couple of planner and journaling stationery websites. I will leave some of my favorites right on the screen where I generally buy my stationery supplies from. But I mean, honestly, Amazon will be your best friend. JetPens is your best friend. But this would be the stage where you're using it regularly. You already have a system in place. You're still kind of new and figuring out your preference within that realm, but you already know, you're no longer questioning whether, you know, the weekly spread needs to be vertical or horizontal. You're no longer questioning whether it's a traveler's notebook or just an empty notebook that you want to use. You kind of have that sort of dialed in. And the other thing is that it serves, and this is sort of what I wanted to kind of like highlight in this entire video, is it serves multiple purposes. Whenever you use these systems, it serves multiple purposes. It's no longer just serving a purpose of writing down your to-do list and giving it a brain dump, because technically you can actually just do that in an empty notebook. It serves a purpose of having an aesthetic and a creative outlet. It serves as an outlet or a healing property or a healing vehicle for your mental health, as well as, of course, functionality and productivity. So when it serves multiple purposes, then you will likely have multiple different supplies and preferences in the way that you use them. So it's just being clear about that. I guess that was sort of like the main thing that I kind of wanted to drive home, especially when you're getting started, because it can be so easy to get caught up in, oh my gosh, I watched a video from Cloth and Paper, their supplies look so beautiful that I need to have everything. And I mean, I would just caution you to pace yourself, because you might end up with a ton of supplies that you end up selling because you end up not using, not because it's not good, but because it's not working for you. You don't know your own planner style yet. So because you're not familiar with your own planner style, but you're trying to mimic someone else's planning style, then therefore it might just kind of leave you a little shortchanged on some of your outlets that you definitely need covered. So as I was watching some of these videos, that was sort of like my main takeaway that I really wanted to drive home, that if you're new to planning, start with something small, start with something simple, use it for a little bit and get to know it. But then also get to know not just the system, but get to know who you become in the process of using it. Because it's that interaction of each of these products. It's the interaction of how does this fountain pen feel as you touch it, as you start writing with it. Can you get your thoughts out on paper clearly? That matters as much. So the experience itself, in my opinion, matters as much as buying the thing and having the exhilaration that comes through from having the new thing and having started within the new hobby. So I'm hoping, and I'm very hopeful, that this video will be helpful to most of you that are just getting started, or if you are a seasoned planner and you've been in the planning and journaling community for a long time and you're kind of finding yourself midway through the year of just kind of feeling stuck, or feeling like you're in a rut, or you're feeling like, something is just still not clicking, I would return back to what is the intentionality of the actual system that you put in place? How do you want it to make you feel? And then how is that kind of working? Because sometimes when these systems are not working, it's because we're actually ignoring one of those compasses that is trying to direct us in a certain direction. So in my history with using different planner systems, the only time that I have found that I needed to switch is when the system that I put in place was no longer fulfilling one of those 3 categories, or they were not fulfilling all of the categories all at once, continuously and consistently. So I'm hoping that with that template, with that framework, you can actually use that to enhance your own planning system and your own sort of planning and journaling system that you put in place without feeling like you need to buy all the things, because it's not so much about that. It's more about using the systems that actually serve the purpose that you kind of intended for. This is all I have for you now that we've rambled on for way too long. Let me know in the comments below, what is the system that you're currently using and how's that working for you? I would really love to hear from you. I would love to kind of just check in and see what's happening with you. And of course, if I can offer you any of some guidance, or if any one of the planners that kind of follow me, if the community wants to kind of help you out, like, I would love to kind of connect all of you together and just keep planning, keep journaling. If you enjoyed this video, obviously you know what to do. Give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe if you have not yet had a chance to already. We chat at least a couple of times a week on this channel, and we talk about anything and everything: planning, journaling, stationery, making sure that the systems that you put in place is actually fulfilling all of your needs and not just, you know, stacking up on your shelf and collecting dust. So this is all I got for you. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for hanging out with me. I so appreciate you, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video. Bye.